Story 1. Easily the biggest change in perspective was at the age of 40. I have had many different life changes and ups and downs. However, my worldview was always somewhat consistent. It was when I turned 40 that I had a true eye-opening realization. Story 2. At 29, my fiancé took his own life. We met when I was 18, started dating at 20, lived together since I was 22, and had been engaged for the last year of his life with a fully planned wedding. He was the best friend I have ever had and my absolute soulmate. That experience shattered all my views and beliefs. Story 3. When I started my career at 22, I had a better understanding of the real world and human behavior. It was a tough period, but it was also good to see how our societies actually work. It helped me navigate through life. Story 4. I believe this is more about experiences than age as a flat number, probably around 17 to 19. Once the teen hormones stopped raging, I definitely became a calmer and less rebellious person with better shifts in priorities. Other experiences like heartbreak, bad relationships, death of family, severe health crises, and shifting to a new city or country all have a heavy influence. Story 5. I would say that when my frontal lobe developed in my mid-20s, I noticed that I started thinking more about my future, observing people more, and not just living in the moment or looking for a party. Story 6. I would say around 25. That's when you start to really understand responsibilities and what you want out of life. Story 7. I would say events change your view more than age. Significant life events tend to be catalysts in people's lives. Story 8. I think all posts should include their current age. I would say 35, but I am currently 37. Before 35, I might have said it all changed for me at 26, so that context matters. Story 9. As someone who is almost 30, my view on life has significantly changed many times, and I know it will continue to do so as I get older. Watching my 4-year-old sister go through chemotherapy at 15 changed me. Watching the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant torture and kill innocent people on video when I was in the military at 19 changed me. Leaving an abusive relationship at 24 changed me. Whenever your frontal lobe fully develops at 25 to 26, it definitely changed my view on life. I do not argue with people under 25 for this reason. Story 10. Honestly, it varies from person to person, but if you are truly trying to grow up and behave like an adult, your mid-20s is usually when you start actually making that jump to maturity. Story 11. At the age of 25, that was also during the pandemic. Both of those circumstances combined changed my perspective and priorities completely. I am from India, and we experienced one of the most severe and devastating waves of COVID-19 in April and May of 2021. Almost all of my family was sick, and I nearly lost my father and my uncle while managing things in my household. It made me cherish my family and friends much more and helped me let go of many inhibitions about trying to impress people. It also made me understand the value of staying healthy, both physically and financially, much more. I want to exercise and eat healthier, and I also do not feel inclined to spend money on things like expensive restaurants and hotels that do not add value to my life, but instead seem like purchases made to impress others. Story 12. I am 21 right now, and I am realizing just how helpless and hopeless most people are. I am realizing a lot about the world, and while I have much to learn, this is sobering in itself. Story 13. I think it is less about age than experience. For me, it happened a few years ago, around 37. I was single for a long time. I lived with my parents. I was an absolute man-child and practically a caveman. I met a girl. She saw something in me I did not know was there. Despite my flaws, she stuck around. With her at my side, I started to change. She domesticated me, changed everything. Story 14. This is consistent everywhere I have seen. You become an adult, a serious adult, fully formed and ready to face the world at age 40. Story 15. I feel like time doesn't change your view of life. Trauma does. There isn't really a magic point where you feel, aha, I'm an adult now. If there is, I haven't hit it yet. Experience, though, especially traumatic experiences, will change things dramatically in short order. These things are more likely to happen the older you get, and they often, though not always, come with important life lessons that usually darken any rose-colored glasses you may have had as a child or teenager. It's not all bleak, though. There are positive experiences that can change things, too. Getting married, having a child, finding your career, and so on can all impact how you see yourself in the world, too. Story 16. It's not really about the age. It is about when events happen. Things change when you get your first girlfriend or boyfriend, you experience your first breakup, you get your first job, you graduate from something, you have a child, the first president you voted for and really hoped would win loses, and during your first pandemic. These are all major life events that changed my view of life to varying degrees. There is no set age these things happen. It is more about the events that trigger the change. Story 17. There are levels to it. You start seeing things more and more differently as you get older. You learn more and more about yourself as you age as well. The views you have at 21 are probably going to start looking a little different at 30 and so on. Story 18. I would say for me it was 25 or 26. I calmed down more and stopped nitpicking as much and caring too much about trivial things. Now I just live an unproblematic life, have a good job, and spend time with my husband and dog at our house in the country. I enjoy calm and peace more than partying. Story 19. It definitely starts around 25, but probably not fully engaged until around 30 to 32. At that age, you can much more rationally evaluate the things in your life that are important and make better decisions. You also feel more confident in those decisions, knowing they are right for you, and what others think does not matter as much as it may have before. Story 20. I do not think it is about your age, really. It is more about key moments. For example, my view of life changed completely once my son was born. That is when I truly started to feel like an adult. And mind you, I was 30 when that happened. Story 21. Not so much a distinct age as it is about when the perspective changes. Whenever a deep-seated belief is challenged, the reality of life becomes harshly focused to a blinding clarity, especially when you experience death up close. When you realize that everything a person can achieve is turned off at their death, it is an altering experience. Story 22. In your 30s, you have made enough mistakes that you may not know how to do everything right, but you are confident in how things can go wrong. Story 23. Upon the birth of children, your own usually, my view did not change so much as I switched to a supporting role instead of being in the leading role. Story 24. Probably has more to do with what types of craft you have to deal with and when. It's kind of like how everyone seems to go through the same or similar things at certain ages during summer, like everybody's getting married, everybody's having kids, or everyone is getting divorced. Story 25. For me, my view of life started changing in my late 20s. I stopped focusing on where I should be and started figuring out what I actually wanted. Story 26. I went off a cliff physically at 30. All through my life up to that point, I played sports. I would show up, play a game, and go home. 30 injuries started happening. I remember I was playing softball and pulled a hamstring while running out a ground ball. Felt like I got shot. Took a few weeks to heal. I played again and did the same thing to the other leg. It became readily apparent that I needed to incorporate stretching into my life. Story 27. Personally, at age 13, your eyes just open up, realizing that not everything is fun and games anymore and that your actions have consequences. Story 28. I would say for most people, their view of life starts to shift in their late 20s or early 30s when they figure out more about who they are and what really matters. Story 29. Every age. I am 35 now, and I do not view life the same way I did when I was 30 or 25 or 20 or 15. The more I live, the more my views change, hopefully for the better. Story 30. Maybe around 26 or 28. That's when I absolutely felt the need to plan for the long term, not just the next few years. Story 31. Mine was at about 6 when I had my first day of school. I vividly remember being disgusted that going to school or work every day would never stop from then on. Story 32. That is not a thing. Age is but a number. You do not really change with age. You change with experiences or when the environment around you changes. I clearly remember myself at 16 and as an 8-year-old. The same way of thinking, the same consciousness. I am 35. Nothing changed in that regard. Decorations change, beliefs change, your body changes, but not the experience of life itself. Story 33. This question sounds like you want our perspectives on a universal answer, rather than each sharing a story of many personal ones. It is life experience that evolves your life. Age is merely correlated, not causal. If you live to 40 and never challenge yourself to grow and try anything new, you will get perspective shifts when you suddenly recognize your mortality, perhaps due to a stroke or a family death, and possibly regret a life of passive conformity. Thus, the midlife crisis of people realizing they drifted through life without truly exploring it, suddenly becoming desperate to do so. A significant event when younger, death, illness, parenthood, hardship, addiction, career, etc., will create experiences that will evolve your perspective in different ways, big or small. The more experiences you have, the more your perspective evolves. My perspective has shifted numerous times. As long as I keep pursuing a life of self-reflection and personal growth, I expect it to continue doing so. Story 34. I distinctly remember suddenly developing a sense of danger at age 20. I had not really had one before. It abruptly became clear that I was not indestructible, and I started doing things like always wearing a helmet when bicycling. Story 35. Early 40s. I always lived in small towns and had a very limited view of the world. Then I moved to a very large city and started working in a lower-income neighborhood. Cannot believe how much I changed. I became really liberal when, before, I was pretty moderate. Story 36. Mine changed at around 12 when I realized 90% of people do not look past the end of their nose when it comes to life and the meaning of it all. Story 37. Over 40. If you have children, you realize you will not be around forever, and many of your friends' parents are passing away. Therefore, you change your habits, free time, and savings to help them out if and when you pass away. Story 38. I felt like I completely shifted gears around my mid-20s. I think I am just beginning to solidify everything as I enter my 30s. I let go of a lot of things that no longer served me around my mid-20s as well. Negative friends, negative influences, and I do not feel bad about it. I feel stronger for it. It does get lonely, but my clarity about what I want for myself has never been better. I am happier on my own than with anything that drains me. Everything has become quieter and more peaceful. I can handle hurdles better. I do not beat myself up for not meeting certain milestones because, quite frankly, my 20-year-old self and my current 30-year-old self are two vastly different people, and 20 is far too young to think your life is over just because you did not meet a certain milestone. I am happy where I am, all things considered, even if I am not necessarily where I want to be. It is still a much better place than around a decade ago, and I have done things my 20-year-old self would not even believe. That is enough for me. Story 39. When I had to bury my older sister, who was only 25, this was about 10 years ago now. It is odd. My life is kind of separated into before and after since then. Story 40. When you start looking for a career, for me that was at 22. When I graduated college, I realized just how hard and complicated life was, due to how difficult it is to find a job and all the things you need to do later in life. Now at 26, I still do not have a career and will most likely go back to school, something I thought I would never do. Story 41. Personally, I think 25 to 28 is when a lot of people mature into recognizable versions of the adults they will become. I have a lot of friends who have come out of this age range as completely different people, mostly for the better. As for the reason, in my opinion, it is because this is when the brain finishes growing. It is hard to describe, but there is a slight shift in how you see the world, or at least there was for me. It becomes much easier to see the paths forward, the work that needs to be done to walk down them, and how interconnected life is. Embracing this interconnectedness leads you to the people and opportunities that allow you to begin building the life you want. Before this, the world just felt like a massive ocean of randomness that seemed impossible to find stability in. It is all those things, but I have noticed that this is when many people learn to navigate it, including myself. Story 42. The boring truth. Life is constantly changing and usually in small increments. Rarely do you have any aha moments like a movie or story depicts. Story 43. I would say my outlook on life changed in a major way twice. Once when I was about 21 or 22, leaving school, moving out, and entering the working world full-time, and again when my daughter was born, which was in my early 30s. However, I imagine it would be a similar effect no matter what age I was. Story 44. When I was about 21 or 22, all I wanted to do was get married and have a baby with my then boyfriend. I swear I woke up one day and realized that was completely unwise, and my life would be unfulfilling if I did that. Story 45. 13 to 14 years old, I realized if I didn't get rich soon, I would be a loser in life. Now, 10 years later, I am very close. Story 46. Around 11 to 12, when my brain was developed enough to understand my situation, it led me to become suicidal quite quickly. This feeling never went away. Story 47. I do not think it is an age thing as much as specific life events. For example, when you start paying for your own home or bills, when you have children, and so on. Story 48. In my mid-20s, I started to realize that everything happening was a symptom of things that had occurred in the past. Basically, things are more complicated and less black and white. This perspective made me see the world differently, and I believe it helped me become a bit less emotional and a bit more mindful. Story 49. I cannot say for everyone, but mine changed when I was 16 and met my favorite music group on my birthday, which happened to be my 16th of all ones. It has made me a happier person, more grateful to my parents for all they have done for me and continue to do. I have also developed a greater appreciation for noticing things around me that I never had before, not just the big, but the small as well. Whenever I am not feeling good, sad, or anxious, it is the first memory that my mind brings up to cheer me up. That is how life-changing it was. Story 50. I went to Kenya as part of voluntary service overseas at the age of 18. Since then, I have just wanted to travel and see the world. Story 51. I hate to break it to the younger people, but your mid-40s will change everything. Live your best life while you are young and resolve any existing trauma. It will all come rushing out in your mid-40s. If you don't live for yourself, then you will be heading for a breakdown in your mid-40s. That is what happened to me. Coming through the breakdown is like being born again. Getting older is both good and bad. Story 52. I felt change at 16, then 19, and I am 21 now, realizing I don't know much. Thankfully, I have lots of time and lessons to learn. Story 53. For me, it was my late 20s. I felt my priorities change drastically. A lot of the trivial matters I let occupy way too much of my time fell by the wayside. I shifted my focus to what really mattered. I am now 34, and I can honestly say I am a radically different person at 34 than I was at 28 or 29, but in a positive way. I feel like I have grown more as a person in the past 5 years than I did in the previous 10. Story 54. It happens several times. Starting to work, even if you are still a teenager, and even if it is just a part-time job, is an eye-opener. Forget mowing lawns and delivering papers on weekends. Getting a job where there are grown men shouting at you and counting on you, and where you have to have your act together, is a whole new insight into the world. When I was 27, I went through a phase of realizing I was an adult. I would notice if a dog was running towards a child and think, if that dog starts biting the child, it is going to have to be me who does something about it. The younger me would have just assumed an adult would always be present or not even realize that it was a potentially dangerous scenario at all. At that same age, when I was 27, I once found myself on one side of a crossing with a young child whose father had managed to reach the central island on the road and left his son behind. While the traffic was passing, I waved cheerfully at the man and made a show of pinching the shoulder of the child's jacket between two fingers, just to assure him that the child was not going anywhere and that he was not going to walk into the moving cars to try to get to his father. When the cars stopped and the light changed, the father retrieved his child and thanked me. Again, the younger me would have been oblivious in that situation, right up until the father shouted a warning. Until then, I would have figured the man knew what he was doing or that someone would intervene to keep the child safe, assuming I had even spotted the problem in the first place. But then when I was 27, I experienced a shift. I guess hormones kicked in or my brain wiring matured because all of a sudden, I had grown adult awareness and a sense of having an adult role that I just did not have before. Story 55. At 18, you are legally an adult in the United Kingdom. You can drink alcohol, drive a vehicle, not at the same time, obviously, take out loans, obtain credit cards, and move out of your parents' home for university or other reasons. These are all significant life experiences that affect how you perceive the world. Story 56. It changed for me when I started college. My parents and pretty much everyone I interacted with were racists. Once I actually met people who were of a different race and realized they were great individuals, I began to question everything they ever taught me and became my own person. Story 57. The moment you give enough attention to focus the way you need to, we adjust our perceptions several times throughout the course of our lives. A no today doesn't always constitute a no forever. People change and evolve. You have to allow yourself to do so as well. Story 58. For most people, I would say very late teens to mid-20s, depending on experiences. Personally, mine changed when I was 10 due to a major traumatic experience. I will share that experience now in the next paragraph after a large trigger warning. Trigger warning. When I was 10, my dad, mom, brother, and cousin were in the car, taking my cousin home. He would stay at my house every Friday night, and then my brother and I would alternate Saturday nights. Anyway, we were supposed to drop off my cousin and brother on this occasion. We pulled up to my uncle's flat. Something wasn't right. His car was outside, but his curtains were closed. He always had them open during the day when he was home. I felt off almost instantly. My dad sent my brother and cousin to the upstairs flat while I stayed in the car with my mom, and he was searching around the property. My uncle's bedroom window was slightly open but not big enough for my dad to get through. He called me to the window, giving me clear instructions. Get in. Go straight to the door and let me in. I will never forget those orders, but being 10, I didn't do what I was told. I got in. There was a slightly bitter, sweet smell in the air, not the normal smell of the flat. I noticed a plastic bag on my uncle's bed. I went to investigate and found my uncle's dead body. He had committed suicide. I ran to the front door, opened it, ran past my dad, climbed a tree and started crying. A song was playing in my dad's car. When my dad came out crying with the suicide note, I came down, sat on his lap, and read it. It explained how much pain he was in after losing his wife 6 years prior, that he just couldn't move on, that he was sorry, and sorry for leaving his 9-year-old son behind. After that, my view on life changed completely. I don't think there is a definitive age where this happens. It's all down to experience. Story 59. I think it is more about when difficult situations arise. My mother passed away in 2017, and it completely changed everything for me. Story 60. Hard to say, I thought it was at 40, but then after I turned 50, it changed again. I would say of the two ages, over 50 is when I really started seeing life as a whole and how all the things and people work together. Story 61. 23 years old. My dad, who takes care of my disabled mom, was diagnosed with cancer, and my whole world fell apart. Thankfully, my dad survived, but we lost our house, and I haven't felt safe or secure since then. I've had to try very hard to educate myself on how to be a responsible grown-up, start developing a plan to be able to take care of my parents, and get us a home again. I am still working on it. Story 62. I cannot really relate to changing significantly around 25. For me, I would say there were two major points in my life where my perspective changed around 16 and around 35. Around 16 was when I almost felt like I gained consciousness of the fact that I was alive. Before that, I was on autopilot, and suddenly I realized that I was alive and started to contemplate what it all meant and what the point of it all was. This, in turn, created a bit of an existential crisis. After that, I guess I went through life's usual ups and downs, such as university, getting a real job, grandparents passing away, and some failed relationships, but I think fundamentally I continued to feel like a young person. Not having children at a young age probably played a part in that. It was in my mid-30s when it really struck me that I was no longer really young by any measure. I think it was the combination of all my grandparents being deceased, realizing that my parents were on the verge of being elderly, and suddenly becoming much more senior at work when a lot of my older colleagues started leaving or retiring. I had been cruising prior to that, and then I had to face a new reality. That even if I still felt young, I was heading into middle age. Story 63. Every couple of years, especially in regard to the life or experiences you are having during those years. Story 64. Currently going through this at 25. I felt like it was over a period of 2 months. I used to get high all day, every day for the past 6 years. I got my associate degree, but I know I could do better. I have dropped drugs forever for health and mental reasons, and I am currently enrolled in school and never looking back. Story 65. Happened to me twice. Once in my late 20s and recently in my early 40s. In my late 20s, I felt like I finally grew up and made an effort to stop living like a slacker. In my early 40s, I felt like I was finally comfortable in my own skin and started to assess what really matters to me in life. Story 66. I had a change in views at separate times. 16, 18, and 20. At 16, my views on family and political matters changed. At 18, my views on family and personal goals changed. At 20, my views on politics, religion, global issues, and personal matters changed. Story 67. Around 15, a lot was going on, and I realized that I could only depend on myself. I learned a lot growing up with a parent who had schizophrenia, taught me kindness and patience. Then, I watched the light fade from my mother's eyes and knew she wasn't my mother anymore. I felt helpless because I couldn't save her. I still carry that guilt. I just learned what it is from and not to let it rule my life. I know my mom would want me to be happy. Story 68. Right after your 16-year-old totals his first car 23 days after getting his license. I just had the conversation of, before last week you had a car, you could have driven yourself to wherever after school today, but instead you have to ride the bus, and I am not driving you around to your friends' homes later. Sorry, kiddo. This is how it goes when you have no money, no job, and you destroy the car that was given to you. I hate being harsh, but for real, this is tough. Story 69. In 2024, specifically November 2024, all these tough guys who talk a big game about if anyone hurts my daughter then decided to vote for a man who molested his daughter and many other women. Then there are those who didn't want to vote because an educated woman with bona fide credentials is the same as a lying, raping criminal. Well, what these tough guys don't realize is that they're going to be forced to watch in the corner when Make America Great Again loyalists go full Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant on them. Story 70. I feel like my late 30s was the transition from the early, confident and optimistic mindset to the current unconfident and unoptimistic, just get through the day mindset. Now, if I were to meet myself at 20, I'm not sure we would recognize each other or feel very good about the other. Story 71. Interesting, but I don't think it's age. I think it's life events. By the time I was 28, I was divorced with 2 kids. I knew then and there that I would never want to marry again. And I never have, not even close 30 years later. My view of life was, yeah, this is too hard. And I can do it on my own. Story 72. I think it is more of an experience thing than an age thing. The more events that occur, the more your perspective on life changes. Story 73. When you lose a loved one, there are significant changes at different stages of life. The first change often occurs in your teenage years, when your grandparents or a school friend dies. The second change typically happens in your 30s or 40s, when one of your parents passes away. The third change usually takes place in your 50s when a child, niece, or nephew dies. The last major change occurs in your 60s or 70s, when your spouse dies. The timing and order may vary, but for most people, this timeline is fairly standard. Story 74. I'm in my late 20s now, so I would say my early to mid-20s. That's when I started to really pay attention to the world around me. Story 75. I learned how not to care so that I won't get easily hurt, especially with hurtful words and actions from the people around me. I learned how to be dependent on myself, and the power of silence is golden. Story 76. 19 when I left home and joined the Air Force. On my own, I paid my own bills and had to make decisions for myself. I got married and had children of my own in my 20s. Story 77. For me, I needed a major event to help, and that was the pandemic, which occurred in my mid-30s. Until then, I was just passively going through the motions and checking off the boxes of life. Story 78. Lots of things and views about life suddenly shifted, and I realized how actually idiotic most people are at 18, thinking they are adults. Story 79, you don't just one day wake up to a completely different viewpoint. It is more of a gradual shift over time. Story 80, I wouldn't say an age per se, but if you are developing normally, I expect a hugely negative or positive event will occur at some point that drastically changes your perspective for the better or worse. Either way, when that occurs, it will push you in a direction that you will be too scared or weak to avoid or too motivated or disciplined to ignore. This will more than likely shape the rest of your life. Story 81. I don't think it's a calendar age. I believe that any of the following events can change your outlook on life more than any birthday does. Graduating from college, purchasing a home, having a child, losing a parent. Story 82. I finally felt like a real adult for the first time. From the ages of 18 to 25, I felt like I was pretending to be an adult and didn't really grasp most adult issues. By the age of 26, it was as if something clicked. Story 83. I am 26 now, and there have been multiple times that things changed. At 16 would be a significant one when circumstances changed, and I really became an adult by getting a job, paying my own way, and taking responsibility for my own life. Story 84. Whatever age you are when you first interact with a police officer, firefighter, doctor, or medic who is younger than you. Story 85 twice for me. First, when I became a mom. Second, after cancer thrust me into menopause, I no longer had estrogen coursing through me, making me want to nurture everyone and everything. Story 86. From day one, it's been every 5 years until around the early 60s. Then, a lot of hard personal reflection due to a series of challenging life circumstances and events. Now, in my mid-60s, I am currently experiencing a new lifestyle as a completely changed person. All I can say is, yeehaw. Now, it's either I am going to die alone or with a loved one. I am crossing my fingers. In the meantime, I am looking for more life changes. How many times can a person change in one's lifetime? Story 87. I don't think there's any specific age. It all depends on your personal experiences. I used to worry about things like this a lot because I felt like I was behind people younger than me in some ways, but eventually, I learned most other people aren't fully developed mentally either. We're all smart in some ways and not as knowledgeable in others, you know? But I'm 29 now, and I think my beliefs mostly stopped changing around 26 or 27. Story 88. I haven't reached most of these ages yet, but I believe they are landmark ages. Story 89. That's it. Whatever ideas you might have had when you were younger, they all have to go. The teenager in you is now almost a decade dead. You have worked a job, you might have experienced some breakups, and you have questioned whatever religion you were brought up with after all that you have seen. Now, you are noticing some of your hair falling out, going sparse, or maybe even turning gray, with a few wrinkles appearing under your eyes, just as a reminder that this journey has an end. Story 90. It's that Adam Sandler joke. In your 20s, you're like, man, forget my parents. In your 30s, you're like, man, forget the government. In your 40s, you're like, I'm hungry. Story 91. I would say my view on life changes about every 5 years. But 22 is the age where I basically got it and understood that I didn't understand and how to think for myself. Story 92. For me, it was 13. I saw a lot of dark things in a short amount of time and stopped believing in society, especially our legal system. I lost faith in humanity. Then at 30, when I decided I wanted to get serious and be an adult, my now ex-husband and my ex-best friend did not. I got a divorce, got sober, and worked on my anxiety problems. Story 93 was 23 for me, but I think it was external more so than internal. I used to be a happy-go-lucky successful school kid. But then I graduated and realized that no one cares about me unless I provide them with something they cannot do themselves. I also found out that there are some things I do not want to do, and there are a lot of them which severely cuts down my financial well-being. Now my dream is to make about $5 million to live on passive income so I can tell everyone to leave me alone, as I do not need them. Story 94. I was pulled out of school because another kid from a different school in our county had taken his own life. My mom saw that I was going through a dark headspace already, so she pulled me out to keep me from going down that path. I ended up helping raise my sister's kids for 3 years, and during that time, I went to my first Pride event in New Orleans. My mom protected me from bullying while we were at the hotel and helped me see the cacophony of love in my life that I was oblivious to when I was depressed. Raising my sister's kids made me feel appreciated and, ultimately, allowed me to see joy in life, as cheesy as that sounds. Story 95. Not a specific age, but an event. It was the birth of my first child. Holding something concrete that you have created really puts things into perspective. Story 96. 18. When you realize you have been misled all the way to this point and that you are actually alone. So be sensible, hardworking, and prepared, folks. Aim to enjoy. Story 97. It is not an age. It is more like a time when life throws you your first substantial screwball, a life or death variety. A lot of the little challenges seem to just fizzle away afterward. Story 98. When you have major life events, like when I realized I was transgender and came out, my view of life completely changed around the age of 18 or 19. I developed schizophrenia in my 30s, and my view of life changed once more. I ended up homeless, and my family was no longer willing to help me. My perspective on life changed again. Story 99. I would say it is less about a specific age and more about life experiences that shift your perspective. For a lot of people, though, it happens in their late 20s to early 30s. That is when many start seeing the long-term consequences of their lifestyle choices, whether it is health, career, or relationships. I have had patients in their 30s come in with wake-up calls like high blood pressure or burnout, and it completely changes how they view life. It is like they suddenly realize they are not invincible and start prioritizing things differently. But honestly, it can happen at any age. It just depends on what life throws at you. Story 100. It's more about experience, in my opinion. I almost died a few times when I was 23. That's what really delineates experience. I met 18-year-olds in rehabilitation with more self-awareness than some 30-year-olds. Story 101. I would say 23. As a gay person, I was super involved in my college's lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender center, but now that I am 30, I realize that the place had some of the worst characters around and that there should be gatekeeping in safe spaces. Story 102. I had a few of those moments. Around the age of 16, I suddenly realized I could have my own opinion and rationalize things. My mother became terminally ill when I was 20 years old. I was afraid to lose her and depended on my older siblings to take care of everything. Then one day I woke up and felt like an adult and capable of taking care of myself. My mother died the next day. In my early 40s, I realized that I finally felt confident and able enough to handle almost anything in life. I no longer care what other people think about me. I am not afraid to admit that I do not know something. I also no longer look up or down to other people. I think everyone has their own flaws and talents, from the chief executive officer to the beggar down the street. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.